Well, welcome everyone to our May webinar, part of our RSDP webinar series. My name is Rose Clark. I'm the facilitator, and I'm serving an AmeriCorps term through the Conservation Corps of Minnesota and Iowa with the Regional Sustainable Development Partnership. As part of my role, I am working to connect the natural resources work groups. And through that, we developed this webinar series where we feature some University of Minnesota folks working hard on different natural resource areas, and then also a regional sustainable development supported project in one of the regions. So today our U of M focus will be on the Sustainable Forest Education Cooperative. Eli Sagor is joining us for that. And our project focus is on the Northwest Project River Explorers, and Wayne Goeken is the coordinator for that. So we're really excited to have these folks here today. A few different program things, if you are tuning in live. We have a chat box on the right-hand side, and if you go there, you can submit questions during the webinar by typing them in, forward it to myself, Rose Clark, or just to all participants. And we'll address those as they come in at the end of the time. This session is being recorded, so if you miss it or want to watch it again or want to recommend it to other people, you can find it on the webinar home site on the bottom of the screen. That's sites.google.com. And it's also available on our RSDP website at the extension.umn.edu. So, I think that those are my basic things. Today we'll kind of be swapping up the order that we usually do, and our first presenter will be Wayne with the International Water Institute and the River Explorers project. So this project got started about 4 years ago. Wayne is the Special Project Coordinator with the Fargo-based International Water Institute, and he approached the Northwest Regional Sustainable Development Partnership to support and expand the youth-oriented river explorers. So Wayne, I'm going to pass you the presenter ball. And you can go to your slide tab and go ahead and get started.
Okay, thank you, Rose. Okay, I'll briefly talk a little bit about the River Watch program, as the River Explorers evolved from that program. And so we'll just kind of get rolling here. Now, here as we go, is this advancing?
I don't see it advancing right now. Sometimes it has a little bit of a lag, but if you press those arrows up at the top, it should go.
Okay, here we go. Okay, yeah, the River Watch program itself is a program that started back in 1995 as a water quality monitoring program in the Red River Basin. This is just to illustrate where we started on the Sandhill River, and actually that's my what I consider my home watershed. And then from there, the primary purpose of the program was to get some water quality monitoring data that could be used by decision makers. So we had a real strong emphasis on sound science, and the education component also was a central part of the program. So the activities that we do with the program, we work with about 25 schools in the Red River Basin in northwest Minnesota, and it's high school students going out and doing water quality monitoring on their local rivers. And we may have anywhere from 4 to 12 students per team. It's an extracurricular activity for the most part. Some schools use it as a environmental science class. They might monitor 4 to 16 sites per school on their local rivers, and just collecting water quality from usually bridge crossings or culverts on local rivers. Quite an extensive network of monitoring sites. So we have over 100 sites active at any given time that we're monitoring on the watersheds throughout the basin. And we coordinate that with the resource agencies, local watershed districts, soil and water districts, the pollution control agency, and others. So we have a coordinated network. Have a data site that actually that was developed prior to the River Explorers program with the assistance of the Northwest Regional Sustainable Development Partnership, coordinated a undergrad intern that helped develop this data site, and who's actually now working for Houston Engineering and is continuing to help us tweak the site to continue to improve it, to make it interactive and provide good information. But it kind of leads into our River Explorers program, and that we started through some funding that we received from the Clean Water Legacy Fund from the state of Minnesota. And but then the Regional Sustainable Development Partnership provided funding to help expand it beyond what we had resources to do, because it turned out to be a very popular program, as we expected it would. But essentially, we're trying to get the kids out, rather than just taking numbers off of a hand pad of SON units that we use at a bridge crossing, get out on the rivers that they're monitoring and go upstream and look at what the conditions are to see why the water quality is as it is, what is the health of their watershed. So the project was to get kids out onto the rivers, to connect with nature, to connect with their local watersheds, to see what's out there, to make that sense of place connection. And we use these geotagging digital cameras to document conditions, and that way we can share conditions with local resource managers and others, the recreation potential of these rivers. So it gets the kids thinking about their local rivers and really connects them with their local river systems and their local watersheds. This is some background about the program and how we operate it. As staff, we always go out and scout the rivers first, and to make sure it's safe. As you can see in these pictures, we have some low bridge crossings. We had one spot on the upper right there where there was a dock that was all the way across one of the rivers. On the lower left, you see massive tree snags, and then we were rescuing a kayak on the bottom right. So these are conditions we will not take students in, so we always scout it, and safety is paramount importance to us on doing these trips. And some reaches of rivers you just cannot do with students. We usually can get through. We use these little, basically 10-foot kayaks that are very light and easy to maneuver in a stream, perfect for scouting on the smaller streams that we're generally working with. So the program has really taken off. Here we're showing a couple of Minnesota schools that we work with on top, and it's expanded into North Dakota. In fact, our fleet of boats is now in North Dakota yesterday and today and tomorrow, and then we'll be back in Minnesota on Friday, working with another school doing river exploration. So a lot of these students have never been out on their local rivers before. This is the first time out in a kayak for many of them. Most of them don't realize what recreation assets they have in their backyard, and then also documenting what natural resource conditions that they're finding also. We work with not only our Riverwatch teams that are more high school based, but we also have worked with the 4-H program. This is up on the two rivers, way up in the Kitson County. You can see, like I say, on the bottom left there, that mussel on the bottom of the stream bed working its way through. We have those cameras, or underwater cameras, that you can take some pretty nice pictures to go with. So as we get out too, we really encourage the students to look and see what's going on. This was a student in East Grand Forks found part of a bison skull on the Red River, and he managed to capsize his canoe getting that, but he thought it was well worth it for this find of his. So it's getting that understanding of the history and local connections. It's really been a fantastic program. This is an example of what we're kind of looking at now, whereas we take the data into the classroom before, and we still do that and analyze the data for water quality, but we also look, when we're out on the river, we use it as teaching moments. And here we were picking up some garbage, but also the instructor in the front there, he was talking to his class about the Hamrock River. There's a dam just downstream of this spot here, so it pools up the water. The community has bought 6 kayaks, making them available to the community. It's kind of an offshoot of kind of, we think we've helped start this. But they're talking about discussion of the dam. There's been discussion of removing it for safety purposes, but they use it also for irrigating the local golf course. So what pros and cons of having a dam in place and the recreation for the community also. So it's a great opportunity, teaching moments when you're out on the river, to look what's going on around you. other partners with the partnership has been key to helping us expand the program. The upper two photos are actually a couple years ago. They had a regional sustainable development partnership statewide meeting up in the Crookston community, and we took the partnership group out on the Sandhill River and down in the Fertile area, Fertile, Minnesota. And people don't realize it's a beautiful little river to get out on. On the bottom, on the lower left, we have students from a science camp that we worked with. We've worked with a couple of them with White Earth and up at the Stephen area. So we get younger kids, and usually it's our older students also helping with this from our Riverwatch teams are helping with the young kids. The bottom right is we were out with the DNR's Ruth Rodland, who's explaining some of the erosion aspects, ecological services specialists, and so we make the boats available for others to use also as they're exploring their local rivers and better understand their watershed conditions.
And Wayne, a note regarding the RSDP meeting that you guys facilitated and hosted. I've heard many, many, many great things. When I mentioned that you were on the docket to be presenting, everyone was like, "Oh, yeah, River Explorers. We remember that trip. It was great." So lots of good memories.
Well, thank you. Yeah, a common comment we get from students and all is, "Let's do it again." So this shows some of the equipment that we take out on these river trips. Is we don't just take a paddle and a life jacket. We're looking for mussel shells. We're doing water quality monitoring as we go, just raising awareness of what the conditions are out there. So it gets to be quite an undertaking, the logistics behind the scenes. My trusty 2003 Subaru has 273,000 miles on it, and it pulls the trailer that generally services these trips. We've been retrofitting the trailer as we go and keeping it going. It's we can get 10 kayaks on the trailer and get another 3 on the car. And actually the trailer just sent out to North Dakota. We had 3 more kayaks on top of the trailer. But overall, for the program, we've, since the 2013, the 3-year period extends a little beyond what the partnership's time frame was. We've had nearly 60 trips altogether, and that doesn't include the scouting trips that we do ahead of time. About 1,000 participants on the trips and over 3,000 miles that we've traveled on these trips. And we're continuing to expand the program. This year we're going to take out at least 6 schools from Minnesota and 5 in North Dakota. And actually I have plans on taking some additional ones out on my own. So it's really been a popular program. It's led into some other activities. We're working with Wilderness Inquiry. They're coming up actually this next month to do some paddling on the Red Lake River and bringing their Voyager canoes up to, again, raise more awareness of the rivers and through paddling opportunities. That was kind of in preparation for in 2017, looking at doing a Red Lake River rendezvous tour of the entire Red Lake River. It'll be the 50th anniversary of it being designated a state water trail. So we're raising awareness there. The regional partnership is working with a group called Red Lake Corridor Enhancement Project to improve accesses along the river and other facility developments and information. Again, communities looking at the rivers as more of a community asset and community development possibilities, and the connections to the river, the physical fitness activities, and all of this comes into play as the people understand the rivers more, that they can be a safe recreational opportunity for their local communities. Another project that's kind of spun from this, we're doing a pilot that was partially funded by the Northwest Minnesota Foundation called River of Dreams, where we're working with elementary students to decorate these 14-inch canoes, the cedar canoes that are released in the river. There's a personal identification number in each one. So if anybody finds them, they can go online and on an interactive data site that we have, that they can register where they found the canoe and where they re-released it. And the students then can track their canoes as they make it downstream. And in our case, downstream is going north to Hudson Bay. So it gets kids to better understand where they fit in the watershed again, making those connections. So it's really been quite a popular program that we expect will be expanding. Then the Riverwatch students, the high school students with the kayaks, we follow up the releases and go downstream and see if we can find the canoes and re-release them and keep them on their way and log in to let the kids know that we're tracking them and we're trying to help them move along the way. Really looking forward to being a great program. Based on the C. Hollings Tattle to the Sea book, by the way. So overall, yeah, just getting kids out there, making connections, making a difference. So now, Rose, I was going to go now to those web pages. Here we go, I think. We also, as we were going out, we do condition reports that we share with the watershed districts, and here is a maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see it. I'm not sure that we can go into
interact with them.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we can interact with them, but we can see them here.
Okay. Well, maybe this is on our website is River Explorers page. Oops.
Hello? Wayne,
okay.
Are you there?
I think I'm back now. This is are they seeing the River Explorers web page on our website, and from this page you can look up some of these condition reports, and that's what we provide to the watershed districts primarily, and explain. It shows more of some of the erosion or any issues that they may need to be aware of, or that they can then use for their decision making and apply resources to improve river conditions. Also, we have the river recreation story maps, and that is more of a recreation from the school's perspectives and when they're out on the rivers, and it takes you through highlights that we see along the way of students enjoying the rivers, and it's with photos interacting with them with the story maps. So those who are familiar with story maps. So.
And actually, Wayne, if you want, I can share that on my page because it's a really cool way to format it. Do you mind if I
that's fine.
Back the presenter ball?
Yeah, and on that River Explorers page, I will mention you see release forms and PHI forms. That's personal health information. So we do quite a bit of background. You get information from the participants, so we know what any special needs we need to be addressing before we go out on these river trips as well.
So do you see the Clearwater River page?
Yep. So here at the start, we usually the opening page, we give some idea about the length of the river, estimated paddle time, so just in general recreation opportunities. And then as you click through the slides, it'll take you to zoom in on that map where that picture was taken at, and like in this case, there's a little video that's embedded in there as well. So it's a good way of illustrating it, and then the students can go back and look at this and share this with friends and family, and again raise awareness of local rivers and generally just some outstanding features that are available and that most people don't realize. There's only 3 state water trails in northwest Minnesota: the Otter Tail River, Red Lake River, and the Red River. However, there's a lot of small rivers that are just great. That's a picture of underwater. The camera's underwater, and then we also have a mussel that you can use those underwater. And then that next picture was we were also doing inventory of live mussels, measuring them and documenting what we're finding. So we're contributing more scientific information to the whole process too.
That's great, and I love how on this map that you're putting a memory or a specific event to the place. I think it just makes it all that much more powerful.
This was kind of interesting. At the end of the trip, we found this whole stash of shoes that were in the river. This is what, unfortunately, this is kind of funny, but this is what people use rivers for, is dumping grounds. And so apparently somebody was cleaning out a house or something and just went to this nearest bridge crossing and dumped them in the river.
Oh, there's your collection. Nice.
Here's the collection. It was a wet crew, but they were very, very happy. It's a great river.
Good.
So that's each of the river trips. We don't have story maps for each of them at this point, but that's our intention, as well as the condition maps that we share with the resource managers. That, in a nutshell, is kind of where we're at with it. And I'll kind of maybe better stop there. I can reply to any questions that anyone might have, or go on forever.
Yeah. Wayne, I had a question that came up because I've been starting to get involved with the Red Lake River Corridor Enhancement Project, which, you know, has a lot of crossovers with what you're talking about, getting people more comfortable with the river. How many of the kids that you guys work with are going onto the water for the first time? I feel like a lot of people around here don't think of river recreation when they see their local rivers.
I would say, just a rough estimate, I'd say, you know, over half, 60 to 75%, I would say. I was surprised by that, actually, that people don't look at their local rivers as recreation assets. But through this, and another project that the partnership is working with up in our areas on the New Folden community is looking at the Middle River, which is, again, is not noted for being a recreation mecca, but they're looking at trying to see what they can do with that as an asset to their community. We're seeing more of that. I mentioned Stephen community has purchased 6 kayaks they make available to the public to just check out through the city offices. The City of Fertile has done that also for the Sandhill River through the Agassiz Environmental Learning Center down there. So I think we're going to see more of that. There's a lot of interest in the recreation, and the kayaks make it very affordable. Generally, these kayaks you can get them for $200 to $300, and these 10-footers or less, you don't need to license them. And a lot of students are starting to pick up on that and buying their own boats to getting out on the river, and hearing a lot more of that. So as we go forward, more of them have been out on their local rivers. But again, the scouting that we do to make sure that it's safe to get out there is important too, so they feel comfortable with what they're doing.
That's perfect. That's great. It's come up a few times in several different regions this year, where when we're setting our priorities for the year, which help to guide what sort of projects we seek out from communities to support and fund. One of the main ones was get people involved with nature so that they value it. You know, that's a big thing, and I think you're doing this really well. So thank you. Eli, how are you doing with your presentation?
Yeah, well, I just unmuted myself. I am ready to go. I just clicked share. Let me see if I can make this thing appear magically on the screen.
Yeah. While you're doing that, I have a little introduction for you in case people don't know your background that I stole off of your faculty member page. Hope that's okay.
That's great.
So Eli manages the Sustainable Forest Education Cooperative based at the Cloquet Forestry Center. That's our Northeast region. His programming primarily addresses forest ecology and management with a focus on resilience. He designs workshops, conferences, webinars, and other educational opportunities for SFEC members, generally who are natural resource managers in Minnesota and the Great Lakes states. His programs are designed to both convey content and to build learning networks and connections that lead to real on-the-ground change. Very applicable to our work with RSDP. He currently is chairman of the Minnesota Society of American Foresters and has been with the University of Minnesota since March 2000. And you guys just had a webinar yesterday. I think I tried to promote that a little bit, but it was a little bit last minute. So yeah, Eli, go for it.
Yeah, thanks, Rose. That's great. I appreciate your helping us to get the word out about that. You're going to need, maybe you're doing this, but if you give me the ball, then I'll be able to advance my slides. I was able to get my my slides loaded up here. There we go. And that also made the video come up. So great, there I am. Maybe you can see me now too. And it's funny, I guess I have to update that bio, I am no longer the chair of the Minnesota Society of American Foresters. I'm an active member, and it's a wonderful organization, but that was a couple of years ago. So I want to thank you, Rose, for inviting me. This is a terrific opportunity. I've been a big fan and sometimes collaborator with the Sustainable Development Partnerships for years. One of my first projects as an extension forester back in 2000 was with the Northeast Region Sustainable Development Partnership, looking at forest landowner cooperatives. I was just finding my feet here in Minnesota, and the partnership really helped me to get my feet under me and learn my way around. So I am grateful for that, and as I said, a big fan of the organization, or the organizations. There are several of them I know around the state. So I'd like to talk just for a few minutes about the Sustainable Forest Education Cooperative. I've run this organization for the last couple of years. I started in July of 2014. It's a terrific organization. I can say that because I didn't build it. I'm just its temporary sort of leader. But we are a University of Minnesota-based education cooperative. We're a relatively rare breed. There are not too many forestry education cooperatives around the country. In fact, I think we're the only one. We've looked into it and not been able to find any others. Research cooperatives are reasonably common, but education cooperatives not so much. So what does that mean to be an education co-op? Well, in our case, we have 42 member institutions, so a good chunk of our operating budget and salaries, actually not our operating budget, but a good chunk of our salaries are paid by the University of Minnesota. And each of these 42 member institutions pays about $120 per person to be a member of SFEC for a year. And for that payment, they then get about half off registration for our events. Our primary audience, as Rose mentioned, is professional natural resource managers. So for the first 14 years or so of my career in Minnesota, I was focused on educational programming for landowners, and we occasionally do get some landowners coming to SFEC events, but SFEC really primarily serves the community of natural resource managers. And that includes ecologists, some people I suppose you wouldn't call managers, but ecologists, water resource professionals, foresters, wildlife managers, and a variety of others as well. So how do we serve them? What do we do? Well, we are primarily a continuing education organization. We offer conferences, symposia, field days, workshops, webinars. We try to be just about everywhere that education happens, at least in terms of those formats. We also have a couple of online courses and are working to expand our online offerings. We are really interested in topics like emerging technology that can inform and assist with land management, building field skills, things like ecological interpretation, using plant community classifications and other things. Silviculture, which is the art and science of tending forest ecosystems to produce desirable outcomes. Forest health in the context of a changing climate has become a really big focus of what we do. Often in forest systems we see communities of trees stressed by extended droughts and outbreaks of insects like the emerald ash borer and others. And other invasive species really just compound the climate-induced stress. And so we see forest health really emerging as a major focus for us too. And I put a few pictures in here just to convey kind of what our offerings typically look like. This is a picture taken a couple of years ago. Those of you who spend a lot of time in the woods might recognize this as a black ash stand. It's virtually all black ash in this particular area. This picture is taken up northwest of Deer River on the Chippewa National Forest. And we are at this site to identify or to better understand relationships between the, of course, emerald ash borer, which poses a severe threat to stands like this, and how that relates to management, what our management options are in stands like this, how we can keep stands like this, which of course are wet. Ash primarily in Minnesota thrives on wet sites that have reduced competition from other woody species. And we were here to talk about, again, what are some management options in the face of emerald ash borer? What can we do to maintain ash as a component of our forest ecosystems? And perhaps most importantly, how can we just make sure to maintain healthy forests? The outlook for ash is not very good. Emerald ash borer causes nearly 100% mortality in native ash stands. Black ash is particularly susceptible. White ash, which we don't have much of in Minnesota, is a little bit less susceptible. There's a little more resistance in white ash, but again, we have very little of that in Minnesota. We have almost all black and green ash. And so there's concern that when we lose tree cover on these sites, they might end up swamping out. When trees pull a lot of moisture out of the soil, and land managers are very concerned about, if all the ash dies, are these sites going to become alder thickets, which are good in some ways ecologically, but not as good in others. And if that is a likely outcome, then what can we do proactively to prepare for that and avoid the loss of forest cover for a long period of time? So again, just one example of the kind of thing that we offer. Not everything we do is in the field. This is a picture taken during a break and poster session at one of our flagship events, which is the annual Forestry and Wildlife Research Review. That event occurs each January, generally at the Cloquet Forestry Center. We may be outgrowing that facility now, but we're going to stick it out for one more year and see if we can make it work. And this is an event that includes, 15, 16 short presentations from 5 minutes long, what we call kind of lightning talks, up through 45-minute keynote presentations, addressing new research findings that are of interest to Minnesota's forest managers. So very applied focus for the kinds of things that we tend to present. Again, that's the research review that happens every year at the Cloquet Forestry Center. Just a few weeks ago, we were up at a wetland soils field day. This is a really fascinating site. We took this picture. That's Randy Kolka in the foreground. He's a hydrologist with the Northern Research Station of the U.S. Forest Service. And we are standing in one of the chambers at what's called the Spruce Project. Spruce is an acronym, and I don't remember what all those letters stand for, but it's a climate change experiment. And so each of this particular chamber that we're looking at here has a temperature that's continually held at 9 degrees above the ambient, 9 degrees above the ambient temperature. And they're assessing outcomes on plant vigor and health in this environment. It may not look so unusual now, at least to those of us in the Twin Cities, but that little tamarack that's right in front of Randy was leafed out, just about fully leafed out inside the chamber, but the tamaracks outside had barely even begun to leaf out. So you can imagine that a 9-degree increase in temperature has a very big impact on plant phenology and, of course, health. The small tamaracks in this chamber were doing fine. The larger tamaracks were mostly dead. And this experiment is just starting up, and we'll see how it goes. But we really try to get practitioners out into this research environment. We really try to create dialogue between practitioners and researchers to help everyone better understand how our forest ecosystems work and again, how we can positively impact those systems. We also, as I mentioned before, focus on emerging technology. This is a big area of interest for our audience and for us. This photo was taken in mid-April during a workshop at the Cloquet Forestry Center on natural resource applications of unmanned aerial systems. The instructor at the front of the room is a fellow named Bill Anderson. Bill spent the day showing us and talking about how drones or unmanned aerial systems can be used to capture aerial photography, to create these really unbelievably cool 3D orthomosaic photos. Anyone who's listening who's familiar with LiDAR might know something about this. The products of these drone photographs can be output as these three-dimensional point clouds that are a lot like LiDAR, but they include color. And so you can see, color of vegetation and a whole variety of things in 3D. The technology isn't quite ready for widespread use for most day-to-day forestry operations, but it's advancing at an unbelievable pace, and this is a good opportunity, as I said, to expose our audience to quite a fascinating emerging technology that before long we expect will be in widespread use by forest and other land managers. And this one I just put in for fun. I just found this fascinating. Bill brought a couple of different drones with him. This is one, very small one, flying around inside. This one had a propeller problem that was making it wobble a little bit, and Bill and one of our class participants were checking these things out. These things are just fun and remarkable tools.
It looks like a scene from Star Wars.
Doesn't it? Yeah, it does sort of resemble the Starship Enterprise, and they're just cool. So emerging technology, as I said, is a focus for us as well. I also want to mention another project that we just launched last year. It's called the Great Lakes Silviculture Library. The Silviculture Library is an example of kind of peer-to-peer exchange in the context of silviculture and forest management. So I defined the word silviculture earlier as the art and science of managing forest ecosystems to achieve desirable outcomes. And there's a lot of textbook science, there's a lot of research-grade science. But really, when you're dealing with complex ecosystems, every single time we touch that system, it's an experiment. And particularly when we're talking about relatively large scale, on the scale of several acres, timber harvesting and other forest management activities, we can learn a lot from the outcomes of these individual treatments. But there really has never been a platform by which or through which practitioners could share the outcomes of their own day-to-day research. And so we got some funding from the Great Lakes Forestry Alliance. We assembled a team of folks from across Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and the province of Ontario. And we built this website and launched it with about 30 or so case studies of these silvicultural treatments. And a few of these are research-grade case studies. So the some published research shows up here. But most of them are contributed by average people, forest managers, not researchers. And most of these describe, as I said, just the outcomes of their kind of novel, interesting, innovative, and in some cases just plain run-of-the-mill silviculture. So we have about 42, I think, published now. We expect to approximately double that in the next year, and we're hoping for growth. We see this as a really good opportunity, not only to share this day-to-day research, as I said, but also to build relationships, build connections, help people who are interested in, say, what do we do about our ash? They can look at what other people like them are doing about their ash in other parts of the Great Lakes region. And they may or may not choose to emulate those treatments, but if nothing else, they can pick up the phone and talk to those people. And so we see this site as building connections as well as sharing information and creating a platform for natural resource managers to share the lessons that they've learned. This has been very, very popular. Many of our partner organizations are really interested in this. State agencies see it as a way to capture institutional memory. There is expected to be a large wave of retirements coming over the next 5 to 10 years. And with those retirements will go an awful lot of knowledge of Minnesota's native forests, and there's some excitement about this site as certainly not the be-all and end-all, but one way to supplement official records and to capture the stories and lessons learned throughout those careers that are about to end. So Silviculture Library has become a big focus for us too. Rose asked me to talk a little bit about partnership opportunities and how we, the SFEC, might be able to work with the partnerships. Really our focus is to be as creative and effective as possible to advance professional knowledge. I said before that we don't generally serve landowners. Landowners are welcome to attend our programs, but our real audience is professionals. We address a wide variety of topics with a focus on applied value of research. And I can think of a number of different ways that the partnerships, or a number of different areas in which the partnerships are active that could interface well with the things that we do. Of course, forestry and any ecological endeavor is really dominated, particularly in our part of the world, by concerns over a changing climate. But wood is also very rare. Forests are one of the very, wood is not rare, but forests are rare in their characteristic of capturing atmospheric carbon, pulling it out of the atmosphere and storing it for a very long time, either on the stump, or so to speak, or in the wood of a tree, or if that tree is harvested and turned into something like my big wooden desk here, for a very long time, storing that carbon that, again, has been removed from the atmosphere. So actively growing forests are tremendously important, not only at the local level and in the ways that we think of them in terms of scenic beauty and wildlife habitat and sources of income and jobs for rural communities, but also on a global scale in terms of mediating the effects of a changing climate that are really driven by greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So kind of local to global, climate as a focus, local ecology and economies. These are all things that the partnerships are very involved in, and that we can play a role to help get new and relevant applied research and information and, frankly, stories out to the people who manage our forests and other wild lands. So that, I think that's my last slide. I put the URL for SFEC on here. I guess that's not a live link. I'm sorry about that, but it's short enough that it should be easy enough to find. I did include the link to the Silviculture Library on the slide in which I discussed that. Either of these things, the Sustainable Forest Education Cooperative or the Great Lakes Silviculture Library, are pretty easy to find on Google as well. So you can just search for us, and I sure hope that you'll find us without too much trouble. That's all I've got. I'd be happy to take questions if there are any.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eli. And I put the Silviculture library link in the chat box, so folks can click it from there, and it'll also be on the webpage.
Great.
Yeah.
Good.
That's awesome. I really appreciate in the library you mentioned that a lot of the articles come from land managers. Is that right? Directly?
Yeah, it is. Some of them, as I said, are written by researchers to provide another way to gain information and learn from the research that's been done, peer-reviewed type research. But many of them come from practitioners on the ground, far more than half. I mean, at this point, it's probably 80%. And we really see those as filling a gap between stories, anecdotes. Hey, I think, try planting this. It worked for me. It's more detailed and I think more valuable than that by quite a bit. We require people to submit quite a bit of information about the site and details and data about what was removed and what was planted or whatever it may be. But it fills a niche between anecdotes and peer-reviewed research. And not everyone has access to journals, and not everyone likes to read the kind of writing that appears in academic journals. And so we see the library as kind of providing a middle ground, or as something to supplement, certainly not to replace, but to supplement those other sources of information that are continually flowing through our networks and communities.
Wayne, did you have any questions for Eli or vice versa?
Nothing specific. Just that when we're doing our river trips, as we're going along our river corridor, sometimes that's in the Red River Basin. That's some of the remaining forestry that we find. So it's interesting to see what's going on, and hopefully, I know there's a major effort down in the Fargo-Moorhead area now of reforesting the red. So great applied work that it appears to be doing there.
Yeah, and there's some fascinating stuff happening along the shores of the Red River too, Wayne. I have a friend and colleague named Joe Zalesnik who's up at North Dakota State, and he has told me about, with some of the recent flooding and exposure of riverbanks, there is some very, very old wood that's been buried, and also I think bison bones and just a variety of stuff that's been excavated from those, or been, exposed from those riverbanks that are just fascinating. Huge old trees like we don't see anymore, and very, very old, that have been buried in those sediments for hundreds or more years.
I had a quick question. I've been learning a lot since moving to Crookston about these discussions about tillage practices and conservation agriculture in the row crop type of setting. Are the same conversations happening in the forestry setting? Alternatives to clear cutting or other things like that?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, given the ecology of our forest ecosystems, alternatives to clear cutting sometimes wouldn't really, would change the systems in ways that would be kind of outside of normal ecological norms. Our forests are very heavily fire dependent, at least in northern Minnesota, where we have dry, sandy, thin soils, and trees like jack pine and red pine that are very well adapted to regenerate after fire. But there is a lot of attention to alternatives to traditional silviculture, looking at resilience. I mean, the resilience of our ecosystems isn't something that we are terribly accustomed to thinking about. It has not traditionally been an overriding focus of forest management, but now it really is. Our climate is changing in ways that we can't predict. We don't know what the climate is going to be like in the future. And, when you're planting a crop for a year, that's one thing, even, for a season, that's one thing. Of course, we can never predict the weather or seasonal climate either, and there's always unpredictability. But, gee, when you're looking 60, 80, 100 years into the future, and hoping to establish a forest that'll be healthy for that period of time, that gets even harder. And so this idea of resilience, of building ecological complexity, structural complexity, age class diversity, species diversity, all sorts of, the many different forms of ecological complexity, and looking for ways to build these into our forest systems, that's often leading us to consider non-traditional and sort of innovative silvicultural approaches, forest management approaches. So while we don't always want to get away from clear cutting, of course it's no one approach is the right thing in every case, but yeah, we are seeing what I think is a really positive trend toward more intentional development of ecological complexity in some of our native stands.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just starting to learn about this region. I'm from Oregon, so it's another forestry and silviculture heavy area, but a very different situation. So that's
right.
Great. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Well, thanks to both of you. There are a couple other little notes I wanted to make before we wrap up here. And again, if anyone has questions or further comments, go ahead and put those in the chat box, or Wayne or Eli, you're welcome to just say them. But I wanted to share just another effort to make those connections between regions and about different things happening. The RSDP Happenings newsletter is released every month. It's this really awesome piece of literature, kind of, that Karen Moore, our Assistant Statewide Director, produces, and she now has an intern, Elizabeth, who is also really awesome at research and writing. So it's worth a look. Go ahead and look that up. It's available in an email subscription if you're interested, and the web page is down there at the bottom of the slide. You can get there from the RSDP webpage. Just wanted to put in a little plug about that. They also feature a project a month, kind of like our webinar series. And so far, we've had the spotlight on different board members, staff members. It's a fun read. So wanted to plug that. And then also, there's another webinar happening today, put on by the North Central Region Water Network, which I just recently have had my eye on, and they have a lot of really good topics that are also super applicable. One of our RSDP work group members, Ann Lewandowski, she presented in our very first RSDP webinar. She's going to be on today, and that's happening from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, and the link is there as well. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody, and thank you so much, Eli and Wayne, for presenting. It went off very technologically smoothly as far as that goes. And yeah, I hope to continue this conversation. As always, if you have questions after the webinar, feel free to send them my way. You can get my email address on the webinar home site, and we can kind of continue this conversation and work on building those partnerships that we were talking about. Well,
thank you, Rose, for the invitation.
Yeah,
thank you.
Well, I hope you all have a good week. See you later. And close out. Thank you, Wayne. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.